Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Right when that door goes shut. Good evening, everyone. It's November 14th at 6:30, and this is the regular monthly meeting of Fitchburg's Transportation and Transit Commission. I will call the meeting to order. Let the record show that all commissioners are here except for Elizabeth Ward, who is absent with excuse. We have no members of the public with us tonight, so on to approval of the agenda. Does anybody need to make any changes or would like to discuss the agenda? Motion to approve?
I'll second.
Okay, Gabriella and Logan, thank you. So we've no discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. The agenda is accepted. On to the minutes. We'll start with a motion to approve. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, are there any omissions or errors that anybody would like to point out? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right. Staff report.
Yes. I'll go through a couple of construction and design projects and then a couple of other items. Sain Road, phase 2 and 3. Phase 2 is the southern part, phase 3 is the intersection with McCoy. We're reviewing construction engineering proposals for Sain Phase 2. We got 2 of them, one from Rupert Milkey and one from Mead and Hunt. So once we decide on a construction engineer, then we will have, I think, 5 agenda items all going through at once through BPW and council for those 2 projects. So
Will they come here?
No, normally that type of construction stuff.
Okay, this isn't about design.
It's not. No,
Okay,
this is construction.
The contract and so on.
Yeah, awarding the construction contract, awarding our construction inspection, and then there's also an agreement or 2 with the state and county. So.
And the timing of work would be?
2025 construction season. So both projects will be completed simultaneously by 2 different contractors. So there'll be a lot of coordination involved. Fishrona Road, we're working on real estate acquisition with our consultant TerraVenture. So they're reaching out to all of the residents along there, and the TPP, the Transportation Project Plat, will be coming here and to council and to BPW soon. Whalen Road paved shoulders, also contacting residents for real estate. We're handling most of that through construction permits, so I'm attempting to not purchase any property for that project. But there is some temporary construction work that will need to be done on private property. So a construction permit can cover that. Rupert Milkey is our design consultant there.
Do we pay for that, like a temporary grading easement or something?
So if you, with a construction permit, there would be no payment. If the resident did not want to sign a construction permit, then we would purchase a temporary limited easement or grading easement so we could do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's small enough, we may modify the design so we don't
Work
need
around it.
the temporary easement. Because a construction permit is just much simpler to get done than actually paying for property.
Is there a standard width?
Not necessarily. Most of this project, since the paved shoulders are about 4 feet wide, that ends up being what we need for temporary construction access, most of the project. So,
And in the case of Wheeling Road, is that both sides?
yes, except for the spots where there already are paved shoulders. So, County Highway underpass, the design contract with MSA will hopefully be referred out to council, or council will hopefully refer that out on the 26th. That'll go to Board of Public Works, and I guess we can discuss under future agenda items if we want that to come to this commission. That would cause a delay in awarding that contract. So
We could talk about that again with respect to the special meeting that was, or change the meeting date to.
Then some other stuff. I think, Bill, you asked about these. The Sain RRFB that was struck by a car south of Lacey. Ford Electric is installing that. I have continued to ask them for a final quote for replacement. I asked them twice last week and once this week. I don't have a response. So I'm going to talk with Mark Hodel tomorrow on if it's time to move to a different contractor on that because they've been unresponsive. So no real update there, unfortunately. And the RRFB on the Badger State Trail at Lacey, I just got the actual easement document from MG&E for the electrical service that they need to install. That will energize both the RRFBs and the streetlights on Lacey.
I've not been through there at night. The street lights aren't on now.
No, they're not. The person that I had been communicating with at MG&E, I don't think works there anymore. So the person who actually sent me the easement is a different person. So I'm assuming that's the cause of some of that delay. Go ahead.
Also to be thermally activated.
Those ones will not be. Those ones will just be button activated. Bus Rapid Transit, we are at the 30% plan review stage. That's also something we might talk about on future agenda items on what level, what should be presented to this commission with Bus Rapid Transit and that design. They are also having a public meeting on November 18th at 5 p.m. at Warner Park Community Center to talk about the new charger on Route B at Northport and Kennedy that will help resolve some of the bus charging issues that we've seen on Route B from using the new electric buses.
That won't be temporary, right? That will
be the permanent.
It'll be the
structure.
permanent one. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
We're also discussing installing the charger in Fitchburg at the permanent location prior to the construction of all of the stations. So then obviously those electric buses will just charge at it as normal, stop at the regular bus stops, and won't ever have to go back to
Those side trips
bus
to the
garage.
maintenance facility.
And then speaking of charging issues, Madison Metro gave an update to Common Council on Tuesday this week. I think most people were there. But the issues with some of the runs being canceled on the 65, 75, and B are largely resolved. Right now, they don't have extra electric buses, so they're still seeing a few issues on Route B. But they're hoping that they will get to the point in a few weeks that they will have reserve electric buses available, and that should take care of almost all of those issues. The new charger at Northport and Kennedy will also help with that.
I didn't get the idea. Are they on the bubble, as Justin said, with both conventional diesel and electric buses? Or was it the electric buses remaining to be the hard one?
It was mostly the electric buses remaining. I don't think they're to the point they normally are with the diesel buses, but they do have reserves of those, just not
a
the
crisis mode.
8 or 10 reserves that they normally like to have. So, that's my staff report. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Just kind of going back through here, in reverse order. The RRFB on Badger Trail at Lacey, do we have a rough time when that'll be activated?
I'm hopeful by the end of the year. I have not reviewed that easement document yet, but if it's all good and passes review, then I should be able to refer that out at the next council meeting.
Where are they running power from?
It's so basically Crescent Crossing. It'll go under that pond. They'll bore under that pond.
So
That's where the signal or the
okay, so
traffic
we
light
have
box is.
all right. We have street lights around the roundabout, and they're not on either.
Correct.
Okay.
There are temporary lights there that we put up during construction, so it is lit, but the permanent street lights are not on.
Let's see.
All right. I have a coworker who'll be very happy to hear that that is almost done. Let's see, on the MM underpass, just wanted to kind of get a sense, and maybe our plan commission representative here would have a better sense. Is that moving forward even if that, what is it, Nine Springs Hill development doesn't go ahead? I'm just wondering, like, the timing, are we doing that because of like federal funding reasons? If, for example, that neighborhood doesn't go ahead for another 5 years, are we building a tunnel that just kind of dead ends at a former landfill for a couple of years?
Yes.
Okay.
Federal funding is the reason.
Yes. So we're basically I've pushed construction back a year on this after consulting the state for that reason, because right now I don't think there's much prospect of that development going in with the original construction timeline of the tunnel.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think at Plan Commission, we were having a discussion about that, but yeah, I think it's just.
We had a meeting on federal funding, and I think what I learned at that time was we want to push it farther back. It'll have to go to like 29 or something like that because of the commitment of TAP
I did
funds.
say that at that meeting.
Yeah.
And then I had a conversation later on with the grant coordinator and was able to push it back 1 year.
Okay.
To
Good.
2020, either fall 26 or 2027 construction.
So that's a good thing.
So,
Very
yes.
good. Good news.
In case anyone's watching this meeting and knows that Highway MM is a rather lengthy road and would like to know where the underpass would be.
Yes. So it's about 1,500 feet north, a third of a mile north of Lacey.
Mhm.
So there's a path right now that runs north from Lacey
Yes,
and it dead ends.
yes,
It's right where that path dead ends.
that would be an underpass,
Yes.
a bicycle underpass,
And pedestrians, yep.
Multi-use path, yes.
scooters, not motorized ones.
Well, they could be motorized.
They could be electric.
All right.
Hoverboards.
Boards.
Anything else?
The last one I had was, former journalist, I have lots of questions. With the Wayland Road bike shoulders, once we get to, was it past Fitch-Verona and then into the town of Verona, do we have any idea if the town of Verona has expressed any desire to do any shoulder work around the same time or in the coming years as kind of that last gap if I'm biking to Costco?
They have no desire to do that.
They have a desire but no money.
Well, that's probably correct.
And so they can't afford it, and they have no prospects of affording it, and so they recently redid the road without it.
Okay.
My guess would be that the soonest that would get done is if the town gets annexed by the city of Verona.
Yes, because there are lower speed limits and paved shoulders when you get to Verona city limits there where the 35 zone starts. I have one. What's the status of the striping of the newly paved?
Fitch-Verona is striped.
Yep.
Seminole is going to be striped tomorrow.
As a 35-mile-an-hour road with pretty wide bike lanes, is that going to have a buffer?
No, that's going to be put in the same way that it was before it was repaved.
Except for the change that you and I talked about.
Yep, the bypass lane at Dolly Drive, I believe. Previously, the bike lane was in between the through lane and the bypass lane, and we flipped the bike lane to the far outside of the road.
To the curb.
Yep, so that cars, there's just less conflict points for cars and bikes there now. Or will be.
And there's no striping on Osmondson, and what was the last one?
Nesbit. That got put back in with centerline and bike lanes, like it technically had, but it was all faded.
Yep, and were those bike lanes, I thought I remember them going as far as the home decorating store. Do they go all the way to McKee?
They go to the city limit, which is the
north end.
I can check on that.
Okay, I can drive it too.
Don't know off the top of my head.
That'll be great. That'll be a mapping change. And bicycle-friendly community applications, they always ask if any bike facilities had been removed. And we had to list that one, that there were bike lanes that had been removed. And then they changed it so that you didn't have to list them forever. You only had to list them in the last 5 years, so we had to stop. We could stop talking about that, but I'll brag that it came back.
I guess I had one that occurred to me about the possibility of installing a BRT charging station on Yarmouth Greenway. If that happened, how is it paid for?
So the charging stations were never going to be part of the federal Small Starts grant.
Okay.
Only the stations were going to be part of that grant. So the city of Fitchburg would likely have to do a budget amendment to move money to pay for that early. But we're not at the stage to really talk about that yet. And if there wasn't a possibility of doing that budget amendment, then that might delay that.
Is there a ballpark estimate for what that cost would be?
I don't have one, no.
Okay.
All right, then, no further questions on the staff report. We'll get into discussion items. The first one is parking requirements and driveway standards, and you had a staff report.
Yes, so I just wanted to kind of bring everyone to the same page, because I think some of this commission got an email from the mayor and some I don't think were included. But to summarize that email, basically the mayor has stated that parking minimums and requirements will be addressed in the comprehensive plan update that is due in 2025.
I think, isn't it zoning code rewrite that she's talked about? Or the comp plan?
They're doing both.
They're doing both, but she says.
Is your question where the parking guidelines are going to land in the comprehensive plan versus in a?
It wouldn't be in the comprehensive plan, I would think.
I wouldn't think so either, but I mean, she did mention it in the email.
Yeah, that I'm reading directly from the
I thought she
email.
said
I can
something
share
like
my screen.
comprehensive zoning code rewrite.
Oh,
I didn't get an email.
I'll share my screen quick. I think it's best, I've decided that it's best to address parking requirements during the revision of the comprehensive plan next year. But you're correct that there will also be a revision to the zoning code, and if it's appropriate to go in the zoning code, I would expect that's where it would go.
Yep. It's actually already in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan says that we should do what I was proposing to do. You want to continue, Ross?
And basically the only other point is TTC and many other commissions and committees will be consulted for input on the comprehensive plan and zoning code updates.
Yep. I have a report, and I'm going to call on Gabriella to make a report. I disagree with the mayor on this. I think that this is the perfect being the enemy of the good. And what I want to do is simply delete the requirements from the document that they're in, and it will have an advantage that when it's time to update the zoning code, there will be no parking requirements, so nobody will say, what should the parking requirements be? It's my view, and nobody's contradicted me yet, even though I've asked in several fora, that if the Plan Commission approves the document and the city engineer signs it like the last one, then it's revised. I don't see the need to go to the council or have a resolution or the mayor be involved, that kind of thing. There was a discussion of this issue at the Plan Commission, and would you mind reporting on that, Gabriella?
Absolutely. So we met on, I think it's about a month ago, it was in October, early October.
Third
And
Tuesday, October.
I provided the redlined I provided the documents that was in our packet last time to the committee, and I sent the link to the meeting as well to ask them to, just to give context. I don't think everyone watched it, we had a very long agenda that night. So anyway, just kind of give them a quick update about overview what we talked about, and ask them, how do you feel about TTC bringing a proposal forward for your consideration? The discussions, there was resistance to it, I would say, on the Plan Commission as a general statement. There was some discussion about how having no parking standards might also be an issue. People, a situation where you create a business, the situation that was stated by some of the Plan Commissioners was people parking on the street, filling up street slots instead of parking in, a commercial planned parking lot for a business, for example. And also just they talked a little bit about how alternate forms of transportation are really important, but that cars are especially important in Wisconsin when you have those super frigid temperatures, when many people aren't going to be using those types of alternate types of transportation, that we have to be prepared for all year, and some parts of the year cars are just more of a use by more people. And then, so they overall, they were like, yes, the climate effort is important, but wanted to kind of advocate for something that was sort of in between the two. They said, Mike Zimmerman was there, and he mentioned that he said specifically he thinks a maximum is a bad idea. He doesn't think developers anyone wants too much parking because they don't want to pay for that. But the developers they want to be able to decide based on the market that they see coming. There was strong resistance to transportation demand management.
TDM.
TDM, yes, that was it. I messed up the acronym here. And specifically, like how Madison is moving towards that more specifically. And Deanna also expressed that there was not enough staff in the planning department to do TDM. That it's just not possible for them to manage that type of complex analysis as part of the approvals. There was some discussion about, for apartment buildings, comfort with letting the market drive that because, obviously they're attracting a certain market, but that commercial spaces should have some sort of guidelines based on the industry. There was less resistance to some of those like list of like bowling alley and grocery store, like they're like maybe those are out of date, but there was some expression of, and again, this is not like the whole committee said, this is just part of what was brought up in the conversation, but that basically the commercial spaces should have some sort of guidelines to avoid a situation where there's too much street parking being taken up, which was not in the plan. What else? There was some discussion about certain neighborhoods where they thought that not enough anticipation of cars created issues. So Renaissance on the Park in the Dungemarsh, Belmar area, that whole area is pretty much all one-car garages, but most of the families have 2 cars, or sometimes even more if they have a profession that involves having a vehicle as part of the profession. So in that neighborhood, there's quite a lot of street parking. It was an example that was brought up. I don't know how representative that is, but something that was part of the discussion. I suggested that we invite Deanna and Mike Zimmerman to have them talk about how they work with developers, because Deanna made it clear that they don't enforce nor encourage parking minimums as part of their work, and that they think that in the process, as they move through the process, that they're fairly representing the types of goals that is being stated by TTC and how that was the message that I received from my interpretation of their message. I did not report that back to Steve early enough, so it was my fault for not giving them opportunity to come and weigh in at this meeting. But I do personally believe that it's important before we make any sort of final decision to get a good understanding from Deanna and or Mike about how they actually work with developers in a practical way, so that we can really understand how that document is being used, so that we're not creating something that's not really related to the process at hand. Yeah, there's my update.
Appreciate that. So this is an email that came yesterday from Elizabeth. Turns out I can't make the meeting tomorrow night. I did watch Plan Commission last month, and they were pretty opposed to our draft for parking minimum revision. There seemed to be a lot of confusion about what we were proposing. They thought we were suggesting we eliminate parking completely, and were largely opposed to the demand management elements listed in the page. My mom, Shelley Milofsky, is on the Plan Commission, and we worked together on a short replacement for the parking minimums that seemed like a compromise between the 2 committees. In case you want to suggest it tomorrow, I've attached it. So I'm going to pass this out in a second. And then I'll keep one. And then on the, that's mine. So this is what they said. I'll send those on that way. And so it says, while the city does not enforce specific parking minimums, developers should aim to provide sufficient parking to prevent negative impacts of surrounding areas, such as overflow parking on residential streets or crowded situations that may affect tenants or customers. In addition to providing adequate parking, developers are encouraged to consider measures that help reduce overall parking demand and the need for traditional parking spaces. This includes the integration of secure bike parking, bike or car share stations, and other sustainable transportation infrastructure. By proactively planning these options, developers can create a more climate and transit-friendly development. So, my goal, getting started on all this, is just to get rid of those requirements from that document that's on the city's website. I'd like to see a revised version of that document. When the developers go through the development manual, they see parking standards and they click on the link and they see that document, and that document has the thing about bowling alleys and all the rest. So I'd like to revise that document. I think it would be smart. The The main thing that's driving parking reform throughout the country is the realization of how costly excessive parking is and how it forces the suburban form. And people who are trying to build urban areas, like our smart code areas, where we don't have parking requirements, are prevented from doing so by rules that require literally as much physical space for cars as it does for the indoor uses that they're proposing, be it office or retail or whatever.
And typically more.
Typically more.
I mean, one space for every 300 square feet of an office or retail, and one car space, you know, with the driving in it, with the lanes to drive in and out, is typically 400.
Yep. So the Parking Reform Network is a national nonprofit that's working on supporting this movement. They have a map, and when I printed the map, unfortunately it did not print the state boundaries, but there are 2 in Wisconsin that have made the map for complete elimination of parking requirements, minimum requirements, West Allis and I think it was Gilbert or something like that. But Minneapolis, of course, there are many big cities that have done this since Buffalo, and another one introduced it about 10 years ago. So I tried to make a new red line that's on the other side. And if you want to take a look at that quickly, it says parking, change it from requirements to guidance. And I put motor vehicle parking because, you know, we often talk about bike parking and truck parking and things like that. But in this case, we're only talking about motor vehicle parking. And so the first paragraph is the one they had before, which gives the precedence in the comprehensive plan that says that we should do this. And then the next sentence is retained from the other one. It says Fitchburg does not have minimum on-site parking requirements. And then come the 2 paragraphs that Elizabeth suggested. And I would be, I think if the Plan Commission is having a cow about TDM, we should just take that out of there. The main thing I want to do is delete this stuff. And as far as the process goes, while I am happy to have Mike Z and Deanna come in and talk to us about this, I think this is very harmful to the city. It makes things cost more that shouldn't need to cost more. The developers are looking at this according to them and meeting these standards. And I don't think it needs to wait for this for either comprehensive plan or a comprehensive zoning code rewrite. And so if we maybe hear what Deanna has to say, but I would like to pass this and then send it to Plan Commission and see if they will pass it and the city engineer sign it.
Just wanted to jump in. So, and I feel like I just want to say that I don't think the staff and us are that far apart. Like I just want to say that because the staff has made clear that they're not opposed to removing parking minimums. So that's been made very clear by our city planner, Deanna. Mm-hmm. So just want to say that as like a baseline. The second thing I want to say is that I agree with the sentiment of everything you're saying and understand like the goal, but my concern and the reason why I suggested having them come in to talk about how they work the process is that how you think the document is used, I don't know if that's actually how it's being used. And that's the core of the issue is like, I think you're interpreting how this document is functioning in the approval process, and I don't actually know that it's a problem in the way that you're describing it to be a problem. Okay. So that's really where that's where it's, I kind of think that we might be solving a problem that doesn't exist, or maybe there is a problem, but this is not the solution to the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. We might be addressing the wrong thing, and that's why, so, because I'm saying this too because I don't fully understand how it works, mm-hmm. but I've been told by both Mike and Deanna that their process really doesn't involve anything like this at all.
I get that.
And so that's my concern about, like, I have no problem talking about a document, but I'm uncomfortable moving forward with anything specific in terms of approving something without having a full understanding about how
Yep.
the staff manages it.
So I agree, we should have them in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just have one thing to kind of add on to what
Sure.
you just said. When I first brought this up to Deanna, one of the first things she said, and I said this at our last meeting, she's willing to just delete the link to this document off of the website completely. Then obviously no developer would be able to view it and even reference it at all.
That might be enough of a solution to get on this map, because she told me there is no policy, there is no ordinance, but yet this thing exists. And you can find it easily on our website. You don't have to Google it, you just look in the developer guide. So if the development guide could be revised to not point to this, it says park, and I see the value of deleting the requirements from this document because the driveway standards are some kind of added value. They say how we should do the drive, it's not on here.
We also have driveway standards in our public works standard specifications, so.
So they could be completely eliminated from this.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, they may be able to solve our problem that way. And so can we invite them to our next meeting once we figure out when it's going to be? Because there's some question about that, but we'll talk about it. All right.
Or maybe if they can't attend, then they can create a memo.
Sorry?
Because the 12th is my birthday.
In lieu of it.
That was not what we were thinking about, but we will get to that under future agenda items.
Holding suspense for your birthday plans.
I just want to say while we're here, I appreciate Elizabeth and her mom working on this and kind of using those relationships. Having two people that are that close on these different commissions is really helpful. I also wanted to just kind of, there was one sentence or one kind of phrase that I'm wondering if we could perhaps tweak a little bit. In the second, fourth paragraph in here, where we're talking about, in addition to providing adequate parking, developers are encouraged to consider measures. I wonder if we could be a little bit more forceful in that and say, something like developers should consider measures that can help overall reduce overall parking demand. It may be a semantic thing, and I know, I don't know how much we can get, any enforcement.
Here's the thing. We got Deanna saying on one side that she has no staff to evaluate TDM programs. So I thought that it was harmless to say, you should look at these things and see if you can build less parking and be happy and you save money. But she is concerned that they will come and ask the planning staff about them and things like that, and they're not prepared to deal with that. So even though I think TDM is very important, I would throw it out of this document in a minute if I could get those other things deleted. So I'm trying to figure out what's the next, as they say in strong towns, what's the next smallest thing that you can do to make things better, and then line up a bunch of small things. But all right, so that's going to be our path forward then, is that we will have Mike and Deanna come and talk to us about how this process works, and then see if we can meet the goals in some way.
Yeah,
Maybe not this way.
I'll invite them to our next meeting, and if they can't attend, I'll ask them to summarize their process.
Okay, that sounds great. Anybody want to say anything else about parking requirements or guidance or whatever you want to call it?
The one other thought that I had was, I don't know if there's a way, if our planning staff do not have the capability to do this, I wonder, is there a way that it could almost be more regionalized? I don't know if the MPO has any resources, or, I can't imagine that the TDM would look that different from Fitchburg to Sun Prairie to Verona. So I wonder if there's, even just general
different
guidelines.
than Madison.
Yeah.
I think the rub is the staff time required to review the TDM elements in each individual development proposal that comes forward.
Okay.
An MPO won't do that for us. They could provide us with resources if we, say, in a future year added a specific transportation planner that would review that, but
They
they
have
don't have
their
the,
round trip department that provides resources for TDM. I mean, they go to businesses and talk to them about how they can cut down their trips and seek alternate transportation from driving alone. But suggesting it and encouraging it and providing resources are completely different from trying to regulate it or regulate development with this being a part of it. And that's what is a red line that our planning department will not cross. All right.
That causes me to have a question.
Okay.
The concept of staff time with that particular topic is a little bit unclear to me. If a developer was required to present as a part of their request for a development to have a transportation demand management plan as a component of it. And if I look at the bullets in the original draft before they were removed, they're predominantly qualitative. They speak to things like the proximity to transit or separating the cost of parking from the cost of renting a property. They're not really quantitative in the sense that someone would have to decide if they've indeed achieved some standard or not. And so, other than extra text in a document submitted from a developer, what extra time would staff have to spend? And could that instead be accomplished by TTC, for example, to read through a TDM plan? So that's the part I'm missing. I can see where people say, hey, I'm already busy and I don't have time for more, but I'm not clear what the more really is.
I mean, so that extra text in the development proposal or the transportation demand management plan, I mean, a staff member would have to review that to make sure it is true and they are actually doing what they are saying in that document.
Okay.
You know, if part of it is, oh, we have 37 bike racks or whatever,
Sure.
or we're encouraging Metro Transit to move this bus stop closer to our development, then, I mean, that's something that I assume if planning wouldn't do it, that I would have to
be
check
verified.
on. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Another thing is that I'm thinking back when it was determined that Hy-Vee would have to signalize an intersection for us when they went in over there. There are manuals for trip generation that say what kind of trips can be expected from each kind of land use and per square foot and that kind of thing. And while like parking demand, there is some element of voodoo or pseudoscience in it.
Sure.
Someone still has to go through those formulas and compute the trip demand. And if you say, I'm going to put this facility at this intersection and it's going to generate these many trips, but the TDM is going to knock it down by 30%, then someone's got to do those calculations. And it's not easy.
Quantitative. If
Yeah.
the requirements were quantitative.
Yes, and so when I say in my first draft, consider these things and you may have to build less parking, that would not require evaluation from staff. Nevertheless, speaking of TDM, got staff upset. And so I tried to eliminate.
Understood. Yes.
Because TDM is a requirement in Madison, and they do have to show all those things, and they have to evaluate them to get certain developer incentives, whatever they are, more floors or whatever.
The other thing I'll mention too, just about in terms of my opinion and how this works, I always think it's great when committees want to do work to take load off of staff, but practically speaking, I just don't think that's an efficient way to do really specific functions of the city work. I just think we can't trust that any commission has the level of expertise that a staff member would have, nor would the timing of a commission meeting necessarily match the cadence of a proposal running through staff. So I just don't think it's practical. And I think it's tempting to like let those people that are really passionate help with those sorts of things, but I think it's I think it's kind of a dangerous road to go down. I don't think it's really that helpful in the grand scheme of things.
I agree with Gabriella, except that I feel like for long-time sustainable operations, I think that you don't undertake to do, you don't use volunteers. But for one-time things, for example, like the bike and walk audits that are being proposed for the bike and ped plan update, I think that's a totally reasonable thing because it's going to go through the staff lens eventually.
Yes, agreed.
All right, let's close off parking requirements and driveway standards and talk about the Vision Zero timeline. And back to you, Ross.
All right. Last meeting we discussed bringing a Vision Zero resolution, a draft Vision Zero resolution to this commission. In between last meeting and now, I had some discussion with Chad Brecklin, Tim Volker, those two, about the city's current budget and tax levy constraints. Basically, the lens we had those discussions through is that approving a Vision Zero resolution through council would commit the city to spending money on Vision Zero projects. Right now, staff has been repeatedly told that we don't have much capacity to add new projects. So I think it is a little bit early on in the process to pass a Vision Zero resolution when we have a comprehensive safety action plan that actually I just got notified today we got the funding for. So we won that.
I want to hear about that.
I should have started with that.
Yes. So the thing I saw was that the MPO and the city of Madison just received $1 million for planning these safety things.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, aren't we a joint applicant on
We
that?
are.
So tell us more.
Yes, so that's the extent of what I know. I got an email from the MPO today saying our grant application was approved and the MPO will be able to support us and all the other applicants with our safety action plans and transportation plans.
Okay, and that $1 million is to spread across all the municipalities? Or was that
Correct.
Madison share?
That is spread across all of the municipalities.
Okay, good.
Basically with that, saying we are going to get funded for our safety action plan, and that safety action plan will give us a much more detailed look at what our financial obligations would be to meet our proposed Vision Zero timeline. In my opinion, it would be more prudent to wait until we have that safety action plan to move forward with our Vision Zero resolution.
What is the timeline on that?
So I have the timeline up on the screen. On the left-hand side is all the different applicants. We're number 3. So we would have the safety action plan complete in 4th quarter 2026.
Okay, so Vision Zero resolution doesn't commit you to implement specific projects. It commits you to go down the path. It is our intention to have a safety action plan to fund projects and to get to zero. So so has the mayor in the loop on what you discussed with Chad and?
Yes, I have not heard.
Because she's the one that asked for the.
Right, I have not heard an opinion or statement from her on it, though.
Okay. So that's a long time to wait, and it, to a certain extent, puts the cart before the horse, because most often you see the timeline is resolution, action plan, projects, not action plan, resolution projects. So I ask you between meetings if you had any ideas of other actions short of it. So the draft was a Vision Zero, resolution, and policy. And so I think clearly the policy might need to wait, but is there something that would be appropriate before the safety action plan that we could put a stake in the ground and say we're going down this path?
I think from my and other staff members' perspective, the part that is causing us to take a second look at it is the fact that usually in a Vision Zero resolution, there is a specific year that the city commits to getting to zero traffic deaths or serious injuries.
Right.
Which implies that you're committing money to it. If you think it'll cost $1 million total, just as a round number, to get to zero, and you think you're gonna take 10 years to do it, then you're saying, I'm gonna spend
$100,000
per year.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's an awful lot of new development in the city. And can we, I guess, at least say, okay, don't do it that way, because we eventually want Vision Zero. Let's build the new stuff safely from the get-go rather than having to go back and retrofit safety after the fact.
Yeah, I'm thinking of slip lanes and curb radii.
Right.
I think those could be just general city policy items that could be addressed.
But it's hard to get these things done without a flag to wave that this is the goal. I mean, for example, you and I have talked about a couple of ideas for speed limit reductions, and they are going nowhere due to there's other fish to fry, and staff time is limited, and the levy is limited, and the referendum failed. So I'm just wondering how we can get this to be a higher priority.
I mean, I think something like a partial Vision Zero resolution that says the city will, move forward with the plan and follow the recommendations in it, something like that.
Yeah.
I can discuss that with Misty and Chad and Tim and see what we can come
Where
up
are we
with.
with respect to the number of serious injuries and fatalities in traffic in a year? I think from time to time of hearing of terrible fiery crashes on Route 14, but
Right.
I'm not thinking of many others.
Yeah,
One over here on South Sayin, of course.
I don't have that information on the top of my head, but it's, I mean, if I had to take a guess at it, it's 1 to 2 deaths in a very bad year.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, what we're trying to do is push the probability citywide down so that stochastically we might get 0, you know? But it's not like, you know, we've got all these data points that are forming a trend like a big, like Madison or Dane County would. So that's why I felt pretty good about just throwing out a year, because, you know, it could start now if we're lucky.
I do have some, not that specific information,
Yep.
but some more information in the high entry network. That's part of our next
Okay.
discussion item. So.
All right, well,
I'll just say it would be nice to have something that's more, I don't wanna say totally symbolic, but more symbolic.
Aspirational.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments about the fact that actually setting a date does obligate us in a way, even if it doesn't literally put numbers on it. And because we have this grant for the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, we do have a very specific
we have money to spend.
next step. You know what I mean? Like there's like, we wanna move towards this, we have a very concrete next step, and just like having the council agree, yes, we want, this is something we wanna move in that direction. So if there's a way for us to word it that feels like it doesn't come without financial obligations, I do think that would be a good thing.
Can you see something like the timeline to be determined upon receipt of the safety action plan, completion of the safety action plan?
Very good.
Do you feel like that's something that we could have at our next meeting, or do you want me to work on such a thing? Or?
I think I can have that at our next meeting.
Okay.
Drafted it, yeah.
All right, let's close that one out in the interest of time and move on to the high entry network data.
Okay. So, this, I'm going to go, it's still shooting, there we go. There's a question about access to the high entry network data. I reached out to the TOPS lab, who they basically have all the data that went into creating the high entry network.
Right.
I got basically the same response that you did, that
Okay.
if you have the credentials, if you work for a municipality or you're working on a DOT project,
Yes.
then you can have access to this database. If not, you can't.
Okay.
So, no real luck there, unfortunately.
But that means that you have access to
I
it.
do have
in
access
your
to it.
role,
Yeah.
and you're allowed to share it in venues like this, or you are only allowed to look at it yourself?
I've shared it in other meetings, so if I'm not allowed, I don't know that.
You committed on the record too.
It's on video.
So I don't think anyone from TOPS is listening, so. No, I don't think there's any restrictions on that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think part of it is the crash records have, you know, people's names and addresses.
They're
and
not
sure.
anonymized.
all that stuff,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, usually when actually always when I share it, I don't share the specific crash records. It's just the little dots on the screen that show there's a lot of accidents here, there's not a lot here. But with this item, I did want to go through what the MPO has on their website. They recently might switch.
You make it bigger, sorry.
I'm just waiting for it to switch to a different screen
Oh, it
right
just hasn't
now.
switched.
Maybe it will.
My eyes might be.
Or am I only sharing that?
You can turn around and look a little.
Oh, yeah.
I was only sharing that window, so that was my fault. So I wanted to go on the MPO's website and share, now that they have completely uploaded their regional safety action plan. This ties into the last item as well. But basically they have the full report and then all these appendices, and then the interactive regional safety plan online map, which is really the meat and potatoes of this. I think, Rick, you had looked at, I believe.
Right, it seemed like it was not all of Dane County when I looked at it.
It's not all of Dane County. The MPO does not encompass the entire county.
But I think that I didn't see anything in Fitchburg.
Oh, there is stuff in Fitchburg.
Okay.
So I will get to that in 1 second. So basically, the way this works is they go through different crash profiles. That's Appendix 3. Crash profiles are things like multi-lane arterials, roadway departure in rural areas, for bicyclists, signalized intersections, uncontrolled intersections, and some other things. And then for pedestrians, there's unmarked mid-block crossings are an obvious safety issue, and then multi-lane arterials are hard for pedestrians to cross, so you see a lot of issues there. That's basically the point of these crash profiles, is these are common issues that have fairly easy fixes. They also go through different priorities for different locations. So priority 1 is a high injury network location that's within an environmental justice tier, which are specific locations throughout the MPO. For Fitchburg, they match up pretty closely with our healthy neighborhoods. And then priority 1 also intersects with a fatal or severe crash profile. And then priority 2 is within an EJ tier and a little bit less serious injury. Priority 3 is any crash profile outside of an environmental justice tier. And then priority 4 is any high injury network location that does not intersect with any crash profiles. So priority 4 is not necessarily a less severe road segment or intersection. It's something that they're not recommending you prioritize because it is difficult to solve. So priorities 1 through 3, they have recommendations on do these things, you will most likely improve this area. Priority 4,
tough nuts to crack.
Exactly. So getting to the map, I don't really want to go into a ton of detail on this. But basically, if you're coming into this cold from the link, none of this will show up. You have to go to map layers and prioritization, click that checkbox, and then you can turn on the different profiles that you want to look at. So they don't really have a good explanation of what these are, but in the PowerPoint that'll be in our meeting minutes, I list which profile is which crash profile. So as you can see in Fitchburg, and also red is priority 1, orange is 2, blue is 3. So in Fitchburg, we thankfully don't have very much red. And most of the orange that we do have is, some of it's on 18, 151, a lot of it is on Fish Hatchery, and then we have a little bit over here on South Cyene. If you zoom in, you can see the streets a little bit better. But the Fish Hatchery Road portion brings up a good point about their data set. So they are using crash data from 2017 to 2020. So that is before and during the construction on Fish Hatchery Road that took out almost all of the left turns across 3 lanes of traffic that used to be present on Fish Hatchery.
Signalized 2 intersections.
Yes, exactly, that as well. So that is something to keep in mind if you're looking at this data, is that you have to consider any area that the city has done construction on and the time frame that this data was collected.
Now the Verona Road, that would be post the Verona Road project though, right?
So that was part of that data set is also during construction.
Okay.
So,
The other two too is Cyene, that we are planning to reconstruct that because of safety issues,
correct.
so.
So, yes.
Not to mention urbanization.
Yes. So this kind of rolls back into kind of our previous item with our safety action plan, the Fitchburg specific one that we just got funding for. That consultant will use this regional safety action plan as a jumping off point to hopefully update the data to a newer data set and look at the Fitchburg specific intersections and give good recommendations specific to some of our higher priority locations.
Just to point out, also, Lacey Road west of Seminole has been completely reconstructed since
Yes.
that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hellish before.
Yep, exactly. So, and then another thing is, I think we all know McKee is not the ideal roadway design.
Mm-hmm.
It was also under much heavier traffic during this time with people going east-west because they weren't able to go north to the Beltline on Fish Hatchery. So I think for Fitchburg, a lot of this data is, you have to be more considerate when looking at it than just using the conclusions from this map.
And what you do when you attack an orange blob here is you say, what's going on with this segment or intersection? What are the crash types and what are the recommended interventions?
Mm-hmm.
And if you see, oh, this has been completely rebuilt since then and all these interventions are already there, then you're done.
Would the funding that was just approved be the funding that would pay for updating this data set to some more current year?
Yes.
And would it augment this data, or would it be a separate data set starting after this one finished?
We would have,
new layers to turn on.
yes. It's actually a question that I'll bring up to the MPO because the MPO is the grant applicant. So it might be useful to use all of the other sub-applicants' data to update this map or a map blanket. But we would also have our own GIS files and stuff like that out of that. We'd have our own report, not very similar, but pretty similar to what is posted on the MPO's website, but specific to Fitchburg.
What would be good to talk to the MPO and then to their contractor about would be for each segment and intersection, which is how this is divided up, start the data collection for that area when the existing conditions started. So for example, you would start them later on the Fish Hatchery Road because of that later reconstruction than you would on the Verona Road, which finished earlier. And then as long as your conditions were constant, you could lump the data.
So
Not lend itself to efficient bulk treatment, but.
yeah, so the industry standard for developing a high injury network data set is 5 years worth of data. This one only has 4 years because the way Wisconsin, the way the top slab put in their data changed in 2017. So in order to not have to, have 2 data input methods for their algorithms, they used 4 years of data.
But now they could use 5.
They could, yes. But for Fitchburg, we would look to have 5 years worth of data and then probably look at the outputs of that algorithm and say, okay, we think we solved this area, so we can, leave that off of our priority list. So.
What would it take to get a more real-time set of data as, DT 4000s come in? They make their way to that community maps fairly quickly in a timely fashion.
Yeah, within usually a month or two.
And so can you tell us why the same sort of integration could not happen with something like this?
Because it would take probably multiple people working on that to develop, code whatever system would take stuff from the top slab community maps data set and update this report.
Continuously.
Right.
or monthly.
I think that's obviously a very good goal.
Yeah, I mean,
this type of
the
data,
data had to
but-
get in here, so evidently that was some kind of a manual process that cannot be automated, you're saying? Or not
That's
easily
my
automated.
understanding. I wasn't involved, so I don't know exactly. But
And currently in this model, there's no date filter. You see all of the date range
correct.
represented. You can't say, I just want to see 2020 because I know I did a project in 2019.
Correct. So that's a function of the algorithm that the consultant used. It's a loss algorithm, which please don't ask me to explain that.
What if it was a Ross algorithm?
But basically, it uses the 4 years of data and the crashes involved, and it helps to expand what it finds in the actual crash data to similar intersections. And so there may be some areas highlighted here that don't have a crash history, that are just extremely similar to other intersections or segments that have severe crash
That's the
history.
big benefit of this kind of analysis, is that usually you're doing retrospective analysis. You say, we got a crash here, we got to fix it. And nobody looks at other intersections or other segments with those characteristics, which are just as likely to have crashes, but just haven't yet. And so
Because we
when
only
you're,
have 1 or 2 really severe crashes in Fitchburg a year.
yeah,
It's a bad
and so when
day.
you're trying to get to zero, you don't want to have, you have to reduce the possibility of a crash because you can't fix it after it happens.
So having the older data then, even if we had newer data available, having the older data could be of benefit if the older conditions on North Fish Hatchery, for instance, closely match current conditions elsewhere.
That's a very good point. So that's what I have on this. It's kind of an expansion of, I think, the original topic, but I think it's useful and hopefully gets this commission to be able to interpret this data without being able to see all of the individual crash data.
I have one comment that I don't necessarily think there's an answer to it, but I just wanted to throw it out there. You know, we do, as an alder, we deal with a ton of traffic complaints and issues, like that's a big part of what we do. And a lot of the complaints that we get are based on near misses. So something that would never have a report or an accident that would lead to being involved in this. And that's not to say that sometimes like a near miss isn't indicative of an actual structural problem, because it's people make mistakes that have nothing to do with, but sometimes they are related to structural problems. And so it's a question that I get from residents that I don't have a good answer for, and that is, how do we assess the risk, the possible risk of a future crash when we don't actually have the data? There's no data around that can't drive our decision making. So obviously the ones where there's actually crashes, like we have to deal with that because there's actual data that it's a problem. But for all the places that have the near misses, how do we work that in? How do we assess that? Or can you even assess it? Maybe you can't.
So
Because dealing with it from a complaint basis is really not the best way to go about it, because that creates inequities in how we handle situations where the people that have the most resources and that can complain the loudest, not to say that they don't deserve a solution, but the people that don't have the time or the resources to complain also deserve a solution, and at least deserve consideration of the limited resources that we have.
If you suppose you have a way to collect, as an alder, you have trouble tickets or something, documented near misses, then you could use this technique of analyzing the characteristics of that situation and say, we need to figure out how to fix all the situations where this set of contributing factors occurs. And so I think that near miss data, even anecdotal, can inform what we do.
And I do certainly think it informs you to a certain extent.
It does, and so Captain Hartwig in the police department and I generally keep a catalog of traffic safety complaints, so we can hopefully see, we've got 3 complaints in 6 months about this intersection, even if there's no crash. Usually it doesn't really work like that. It's usually more scattered throughout the city and not the most helpful thing in decision making. But I am hopeful that diving deeper into this high injury network data and our own specific safety action plan will help address those areas by using this kind of formulation, so we can see, similar characteristics in different places in the city that might not have that.
So you can
actual
apply
crash
the
history.
lessons of
Yes,
this to other similar.
exactly.
And some of the lessons that we're getting from crashes will be able to be applied to the areas where the near misses occur.
Mhm. Yeah.
How broad is the data set that, so I think if I heard what you said correctly, you could see an orange area here, and on that street, there has been no actual accident, but it is a street that is designed much like somewhere else in what geography where there has been an accident? Is it Dane County? Is it the United States? Is it the world?
I would have to double check on this it's outlined in the report, I know that.
Sure.
I think for this analysis, it's Dane County, it's the MPO boundary,
Okay.
I believe.
Because you got
But
real-
I know that is in the report, I just don't know it off the top of my head.
It seems like in a way that is a way of collecting near miss. Unfortunately, but in a way saying, if there are near misses in a particular area and somewhere else there's actually been an accident on a very similar street design, you would get the color here because your street is similar to something that has actually had an accident. Is that the right way of interpreting that? So that you would see this, if the near miss is something that sometimes results in an actual incident, then you would see it on the map before it happened here.
I think if we were able to collect a robust data set of near misses, then I think trying to include them in future analysis of this type would be very useful. I think collecting that data set is
Oh yeah, that's not what I mean.
possible.
I'm saying something happened somewhere on an identically designed street, but in Dane County or in the state of Wisconsin or whatever the breadth of the data set is. And you have a street that's exactly like that. And it lights up on this map because you have a street that potentially has a problem. Right? Because otherwise, near miss, I think, is very qualitative, right? My near miss is you're like, they were nowhere close
Yeah,
to me.
exactly. And that's why it's hard. It's like,
Yeah.
you can't, it's just hard to help those. It's hard.
While you have the map up, Ross, would you zoom in on Southdale? The reason I just noticed that there's some red.
Yes, so Southdale is one of our, I turned off equity areas because you can't see the streets under the yellow area. But Southdale's obviously an equity area. So anything with a severe injury risk is lit up red here.
Okay.
Most of it is at this intersection with East Badger. And then I believe the only section that is on a solely City of Fitchburg road is this section on East Badger. So this is a profile priority 1 priority 1, and a profile 2 priority 1. And those are multi-lane arterials and turning vehicles at signalized intersections.
That intersection is not signalized.
I believe it's stop controlled. I believe
Oh, okay.
that's what it's referring to.
Okay.
Is there a way, so I mean, just by nature of this, the vast majority of the things that are getting flagged are main roads in the city. Is there anything being done to show like the most dangerous residential intersections and or roads?
So the residential streets do show up much more in the priority 4 areas. So now
Okay.
the red, besides what we just looked at in Southdale, is priority 4. It's really annoying that it's the same color. But as you can see, a lot more of our residential streets do show up in here.
So those are this would be really hard to fix category? That's what
Yes,
that was? Okay.
and also they're not, in general, they're not as severe because they're much lower
It's
speed.
residential.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to know which ones are kind of the worst ones.
Well, between now and the next meeting, we'll all surf around this map and.
No, but that's what we can't see, right? No,
We can see
can't
this.
map.
You can see
We just
this,
can't
yeah.
see the data that's behind it.
Right.
So you can't tell if there was actually an accident somewhere or simply you're looking at a street that's similar.
Right.
These streets are being profiled
Yes.
as dangerous.
You also can't even really tell if it is one of 3 streets like that or one of 300 streets like that.
So you can sort by the different profiles.
Yeah.
So like if you just wanted to look at the multi-lane arterials, you can do that. And I think that's probably more useful for what you're talking about.
Sure.
Is, picking a crash profile and saying, hey, I really want to look at bikes in areas that don't have bike infrastructure.
Yes.
Just something that someone may hypothetically be interested in.
We should move along.
That was helpful, thank you.
Okay, so I don't think that we have anything else for this. Let's go on to, so I asked Ross to put this on the agenda because the referendum failed, and the question is, we really, really, really want Fitchburg to be connected with transit, all day, every day transit, and are we gonna get that now without a referendum?
So I talked with Chad about this. I got this email that you guys can read. To summarize, because the referendum failed.
There's $637 of wiggle room.
It's a good 3 bus hours.
I don't even know if it's that. Basically, there are no options for funding in 2025 without council direction or action. I think a lot of people here know the different mechanisms that council could enact for this, but one would be a budget amendment, which is taking money from another project or fund. Another one would be applying for a grant that may interfere with our public transit assistance program, which is our main source of funding for our bus service. And another option is putting something in the 2026 budget.
The one that was just, 2026.
2026.
Yep. And you were gonna talk about costs a little bit.
Yeah, I can do that. But another thing, if you watch the mayor at the Common Council meeting on the 12th, not the 13th, she stated that we won't be able to expand service on 65 and 75 without the referendum, and her kind of directives or statements in her referendum statement where the city will have to find alternate avenues or scale back plans. She does not believe that a referendum in April of 2025 is prudent because it would look like the city is not listening to its voters. And she hopes the state releases more funding for municipalities in the next state budget. So I just thought that was important context for this.
Get on your suit and get down to the Capitol and talk to the majority.
So then just to kind of for more context in this discussion, this is a map of the bus routes that serve the city of Fitchburg. The main ones are the B, 65, and 75. D, G, and H are obviously important and serve areas of the city, but they generally serve one neighborhood and then go loop back into Madison. Or in the case of the D, they go out to Verona. So I've got total monthly ridership here. That includes every rider on the route, whether it's from Fitchburg, Madison, Verona, or wherever else. And then my extremely, extremely, extremely rough estimate of the Fitchburg ridership. This is not based off of any data. This is kind of based on how many stops are in Fitchburg and how many riders the route gets.
There is a thing that we used to call the dot map, where the dots are proportional and have underlying them the number of boardings at that stop. That would be on the principle that most folks start one place and go to another place and then they come back to the first place. That generally would be a good estimate of half of the rides that originated or ended in Fitchburg.
I did use that to develop these estimates. But those are based on like driver counts and surveys, and off of generally pretty short time frames.
I thought that the fare box collected the information and accumulated it to the nearest stop. Of course, that was the old fare system, so I don't know what the new one does.
Right. I think that's part of the issue.
Okay. All right, well, this is way better than not knowing anything, so thank you for that. I once did organized a meeting and had a guest speaker come in, and this guy wrote a book called How to Estimate Anything, and his principle was, if you ask an expert to estimate something, you will get data that you can really use. I mean, it could be like something that nobody could measure, but working with feelings of people who know the situation really narrows down the confidence intervals of guesstimates, and so we should not sneer at these data. We should plan based on these. So do we just wait to hear what the state budget's like and go to state budget hearings? Is there anything else that we should be doing as a transportation and transit commission? I mean, I'm going to be doing that.
We can lobby our assemblyman and senator.
Yeah. Actually, I have some advice on that because I've done it in my amateur lobbying jobs. Obviously, our delegation from Dane County is in the minority. They're all on board with more state aid for spending the surplus that Tony U-verse has been vetoing majority attempts to return to taxpayers to give it to municipalities and schools. The thing to do is to go. There will be 4 hearings around the state by the Joint Finance Commission and our Joint Finance Committee. And now you're talking to a majority of the majority on that commission. And they do take the input seriously. They may ignore you in the end, but we need to tell them that transit and other kinds of state aids to municipalities are important, and that levy limits are a bad idea, and that small government is a great idea for the state if you like it, but if we want to vote for some services that we want, we should be able to do that.
I have a question, and this is something I brought up before, but I'm curious about the feasibility of extending Route B down to where the planned endpoint of the BRT is in the near future, I would be interested to know what the cost of that would be, because we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, which is much easier to fit into a annual budget. And I mean, I'd have to look on the map, but there's a ton of seniors that live off of Chapel Valley.
Right.
And those seniors might actually be within 3/4 of a mile of that endpoint. You'd have to look at the map. But
I'm almost certain they are.
I would think so too. And so like, obviously that's not enough for the whole city. But if you expand it to potentially hundreds of seniors,
Oh, yeah.
just by extending the endpoint that we will be doing regardless, and also would match Madison Metro's goals of having another endpoint for electric charging, it kind of seems like a no-brainer.
We just have to keep pushing that electric charging station.
I mean, seriously though, because it benefits multiple goals, and I just can't imagine that it's that much of an operating cost, especially since I know that B route, they have to loop around the neighborhood anyway to get back to going the other direction.
Yeah.
So they're already doing a loop that's really not necessary because there's no stop on that loop. The stop is only on, what is that?
Cahill.
Cahill.
Mhm.
So, I don't know.
Does that then open, but that then would also open the senior center to everyone else, correct? Because that's a full, that's not.
No.
That's too far from the
B's
senior
not an
center.
all day.
No.
The B's not an all day.
It is, but it's not, it's still too far from the library.
It would,
But so like,
so the end of the road would need to be within 3/4 of a mile of the civic campus.
because like the
I'm
end
just
of the
gonna
route.
go, you're saying just doing,
Maps.
just doing.
Or actually no, paratransit only extends to existing points, right? On the
It has to
road?
be on the fixed routes,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so,
No, within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed
From
road.
the fixed route, not the stops.
so you
It's
could,
the route, not the stop.
so those are the people who are eligible, but like, if we bring B to Tiverton Pike, could people get a ride to the civic campus?
It has to be on
It
the
has to
road.
be within 3/4 of a mile.
So you can be
of
delivered anywhere within 3/4 of a mile of the road.
another route.
Yeah, so how close do you have to get
So
to put the civic campus 3/4 of a
1.25
mile?
kilometers. Is that 3/4 of a mile? It's close.
Or could we get down to Mickelson and put a, no, that is awfully close, but it's 4,100, I think that's north of 75%.
78%.
Let me go down, yeah.
Can we just see if we can make an exception?
Go to the corner of the lot. Did you go to
Yeah.
Brandon Avenue then?
Go to the corner of the lot.
Yeah, go to the.
I started
Okay,
there.
The
This is
farthest
the
point.
furthest point.
And it is as the crow flies, it's not,
Yes.
yeah, put it at
Go
the.
to the driveway, man.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, right there.
Oh, yeah, now
Now we're
safe.
talking.
I don't know, can we,
Well, everybody could get a ride to Terso, right, and then walk across the street.
The senior drop off point.
everyone goes to Tercel.
That's 0.73 miles.
Cause I mean, like, just getting something close, cause that opens up the whole city. I mean, everyone that's within a 3/4 of a mile in the whole city to be able to go there.
Exactly.
And like,
You have to start in an eligible area and you have to end in an eligible area.
Okay.
So they would still,
It's not
for
the
example,
whole
if they're
city.
coming from their
that's a
residence,
huge chunk of the city.
yeah. But all those Chapel Valley folks are clearly within the 3/4 of a mile of Brendan and,
Yeah, that extends
yeah.
somewhere over here.
It also, well, of course, Hatchery Hill's already covered.
I will reach out to Metro about the cost of that extension.
So that leads me to a question I was thinking about this topic. And maybe it's a topic you don't want to open, but my question is, who negotiates the rates with the city of Madison? How do those numbers get established?
So we enter into 5-year contracts with the city of Madison.
Okay.
The rate is determined basically by, it's not really like a negotiating committee, but finance department, legal, and public works.
And the number is arrived on by taking the entire cost of running the system
Yes,
and dividing by the number of route hours in the system,
in the entire
system.
bus system.
So
Yeah. And then they attribute the route hours that are in Fitchburg to Fitchburg and charge us per hour.
every community gets the same rate per hour.
Including Madison.
Yes.
And is it the gross cost or the net cost?
It's net of fares. What happens is that, this may have changed, but when the contracts were negotiated, you would have a payment and then the fares that were collected in Fitchburg would be credited again to you. Is that right still?
Yes, they also subtract the advertising revenue they get from the ads on the sides of the buses.
Okay. So if you went to the city of Madison, and the routes are already predetermined as a part of that negotiation?
No.
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 So you can say, I want a new route that runs around McKee Farms Park, and if you pay the service hours, you get the route. I mean, there's certain capacity constraints that were severe in years past, but are relaxed somewhat now.
But if you, for example, said, I'm going to install a charging station on Yarmouth Greenway, and I want Route B to reach that station, and I don't want to pay any more money.
They would say no.
No, the contract says we would pay the money.
But you're driving faster buses, so the number of hours is less.
Buses aren't any faster.
Well, they may not get stuck in traffic as much once we have the dedicated bus lane, you know.
So faster in Madison too. I mean, it's just a percentage of the hours that
The estimates for the hours needed on Rapid Route B versus current Route B,
Yes.
it's the same amount of
It's the
hours.
same amount of hours.
Yes, it's more buses more frequently.
More frequently. Yes, okay.
And
Well, that's a good point. It's bus hours, right?
So if a route takes 10 buses to run, basically a half-hour service interval costs basically twice as much as a 1 hour service interval, because you need twice as many buses
When they
to hit
plan
the
the
30-minute mark.
when they plan the route, they know how many buses it needs.
Yep.
And so those buses will come on in the morning and circulate, and then they go off and in turn in the evening. And so that there are these nominal hours, because you don't run a route in 17 minutes, you run it in 30 minutes, because when you get to your time spot, you wait for the time and then you move on. So
Did we start?
route hours are quite accurate in terms of you're paying for the driver and the bus, even though they may not be moving and transporting people, they might be waiting at a time stop.
Were we automatically paying more when we annexed portions of the town of Madison? Because there's
The town of Madison.
Whatever bus hours are
Yep.
through Southdale, those
Yes.
are now hours instead of the town.
Well, the town of Madison, I don't know, they did have bus service, but there was also the route redesign happening at that time. So the routes were basically redone in the areas that we took over from the town of Madison.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a one-to-one
Yep.
thing.
Okay.
We redid the routes.
But the old-
about that same time.
The old 16 had a similar route than the current route that goes through Southdale. And so we had route hours in Southdale on the new route, and the town of Madison had them on the old route.
Ross, I'm wondering if you could also get some data about what it would look like if we took Route 65 and even just for the couple runs that it does every day, were to get it to kind of the McKee Farms Park area where that kind of the long-term goal is to have almost like not a transfer point, but kind of that interplay between the 65 and the 75. so that, I mean, I'm thinking of, we've heard concerns about folks not being able to get to the senior center. Would it provide another option if we could get the 65 up to that corner of McKee and Fish Hatch, even for those couple times a day, and then, it's at least, you may have to spend 8 hours at the library and the senior center, but that's better than, if you only wanted to spend, just go for the lunch, get the ride and go back, I don't know.
For using the bus to get there, not for paratransit reasons.
Right. Since it's not only service, paratransit would not be an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and my observation, and I think yours probably is too, that they've been using the electric buses for 65 at least some of the time.
Yes.
I haven't gotten one since,
Not lately, though, right?
yeah,
Not much since BRT actually.
correct,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Much to my chagrin as I sit through the roundabouts and don't get to watch the 90-degree bend in the morning, but,
But a charging station could be appealing for that bus as well as for B.
I don't know how long the buses will sit kind of outside the city campus. Do we know, I get on in Swan Creek, so I don't ever get to this far end of the route, but if they're sitting there already for 10 minutes between runs, is there enough time to get up to Fish Hatch and McKee and then shoot right back down and pick it up without really much cost?
Either way, the driver still needs a
They
break.
need a break,
Yeah, and it's a lot easier for the driver to go into the coffee shop or the library for their break than it is over at Brendan.
yeah.
There isn't any.
And you know what the dwell time is for the charge that they plan at the north and south?
I don't.
Because you would have to allow time for that as well, in addition to getting up there. I would guess that to extend that route up to Brendan or McKee would probably take an extra bus.
Which is what's gonna cost them.
Probably. You need some fraction of an extra bus if.
And buses don't come in fractions, so you need a whole bus.
Well, the new ones will split in half.
I do see on the B, it's quite routine to see two of them sitting there, the one that's about to leave and the one that just got there. So they do have plenty of dwell time in Hatchery Hill.
Okay.
It could be that they built the schedule for it to go to Brendan and they're not going to Brendan, so they pile up there.
They haven't redone the schedule yet. It's just for the existing Route B.
All right, let's talk about future agenda items for a minute.
Can I ask another question about funding? I'm just kind of going through because I wrote down some funding thoughts. So do we know how much Epic pays to the city for the privilege of having 75 go to the campus?
Pays to the city of Fitchburg.
No, to Madison, presumably.
So Epic pays Verona, Verona pays Madison. I don't know how much that is.
But they're paying that route hour rate.
Right.
Yeah, and they fund the entire amount of route hours in Verona.
Everything in Verona is funded by Epic, not by
For the 75.
city of, okay.
Yeah.
Not by the city of Verona.
Correct.
And was that initiated, do we know, by the city of Verona, or was it initiated by Epic? So
They get plenty of people who want to
Sure.
bus there.
Yeah. Well, that was where I was going, was do we have employers in a similar situation in the city of Fitchburg that would see a benefit to having additional bus service that could fund the gap?
So Chad and I have previously talked with Promega and with Grace, who are both on the 65 route,
Yes.
about this expansion. Neither was interested in funding it, but they were supportive of the expansion.
Yeah, the additional frequency doesn't help so much someone who's working normal sort of
It would
business
help.
hours.
It would help a Grace because their CNA staff, they work. I forget what the hours of their shifts are, but they're not 9 to 5. They're not at those
7 to
normal-
3 to 11
Yeah,
kind of shifts, hospital type shifts.
so it
But
would help them
We'll
staff
also
their
help
shifts.
Grace visitors who come and stay for a few hours and then leave. Now they have to drive because they don't want to stay all day.
Sub-Zero is the one that runs shifts that are at different hours of the day.
And
Standard 3 shift, right, like 6 a.m.
they have shifts that are offset from the usual kinds of shifts to help with congestion at Verona and McKee roads. They've been doing that for years.
Changes 2 o'clock, I believe.
But yeah, I think 6 a.m., 2 in the afternoon.
And many of their employees come from places where there's no transit.
Yeah.
It's not like Epic where they all live on the Near East Side.
Yeah.
All right, anything else, Rick?
That was like, I was trying to come up with ideas as far as exploring revenue sources that could
Bake
pay for
sales.
things that were not, bake sales. So,
That's a good idea.
some cities, including the city of Madison, have a wheel tax. We do not.
That's something that we have talked about as a funding source. When we are having a discussion about the referendum, we had a long discussion about all the different funding sources that Fitchburg doesn't currently use.
Sure.
Some
Wheel
of which have
taxes.
since become illegal. Some of which have since become
The
illegal.
transportation utility that has since been disavowed. There's a wheel tax, which we have never done in the past. There is a streetlight tax
Streetlight utility.
that some municipalities have done. There is,
Not gone over well in the village of Oregon.
oh, I cannot imagine it. And then there is also impact fees, but that's not operating money, but it would pay, we do currently have an impact fee for the new fire station. There's always a time horizon upon which they expire. I can't remember exactly when that expires, but it's in the near future,
Like 15 years or something.
It's closer than that though, because we talked about potentially replacing that impact fee with one for the police station that's being built. As that one sunsets, we start a new one. So, but that can't be used for bus operating funds.
Okay, moving on to future agenda items. We talked about having either a special purpose meeting with the one agenda item for the speed limit change, or possibly moving our next meeting from the second Thursday to the first Thursday so that we would be before the council meeting. So we don't know when a special meeting would be. Maybe it would be a Thursday night at this time. Ross will have to get in touch with us if we go that route after clearing it with FACT, because FACT has to be able to host the meeting.
Which day, what regular day are you talking about?
If we were to meet at 6:30 on the first Thursday of December instead of the second.
So the 5th instead of the 12th.
So the last council meeting of the year is on December 10th, and our last meeting of the year is on December 12th. But there is an agenda item that should have been on our agenda for tonight, and I apologize that it got left off. But if we waited until our next meeting, then it would be delayed until after the first of the year.
I can do the 5th.
Yeah, I'm okay too.
That works for me.
This is an
So the week
instead
prior.
of meeting, not an in addition to meeting.
Yeah, if we have a single agenda item, special Zoom meeting, we would still have the meeting on the 12th.
Yes.
If we move the meeting to the 5th, we would not need the special meeting. That would be our only meeting in December.
Yes.
All right, so the sense of the body is that that would work. And so Ross will negotiate with FACT and get back to us with a solution by email.
Yep.
Do you have any other agenda items that we have queued up? We have some questions about the high entry network, I think, and a potential maybe Vision Zero resolution.
Right, Vision Zero resolution, bus rapid transit, if the commission wants to make that a discussion item, we can like review plans, stuff like that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
If we know, and by that, do you mean a potential extension of Route B, or is that something separate?
This is the design of.
The design of BRT, okay.
Yeah, we have 30% plans for that, so I think I've given my comments, but it would be useful to have others.
I'd be particularly interested in intersections and bike facilities.
Budget 0.
Anything else?
Given the new reality that we find ourselves living in, should we have a discussion topic about the transportation and or housing sections of Project 2025, which will likely be, I guess, at least 50% likely those policies will be implemented.
I would assume those discussions are already happening in City Hall. It's certainly happening in my organization. But I mean, I think it's relevant. I don't know that,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's,
I think that we should wait for something concrete. Not too much we can do about it, I guess.
If anybody's interested, there's a YouTube channel called City Nerd, and he did at least one episode about Project 2025, in case you're interested in getting a summary.
And some dry humor.
Yeah, you definitely have to watch him at least 1.5 to avoid falling asleep.
All right, anything else? I think we're up to, our announcement is that we meet on the 12th. We might meet on the 5th, and we might meet on the 12th and have a special meeting. Any other announcements? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Thank you, Micah. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
I.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, everyone.